Okay, so we're making good progress going through this whole exercise here on real-world stored procedures. We got as far as completing step 6 with our 5 standard stored procedures for the patient table. Right? Just to note that we did use the view we created as the source of data in our selects, right? So that we can eagerly load that extra lookup information and so on. So we just have a couple left to do, and then this would be pretty much ready to use in a client application. So just bringing up SQL Server for a second. This is the version as we left it off, right? So I have the stored procedures over here on the side, and just to quickly bring up any one of them, just to remind you, all you have to do is they're under programmability. If you want to see the script that you wrote, I can just script it once again as a create to a new query window, and bada bing, bada boom. Any comments I might have included would be there as well, and so on. So we have the 3 actions. Again, emphasis on the fact that they deal with one record at a time, inserting a record, updating a record, and so on. We have added the timestamp factor, so that plays a role in the actual where clause, right? Doesn't raise an error or anything, but we'll know because no record was updated if the timestamp value doesn't match, and so on. Okay, now just while we're here though, I might just, before I go on and actually complete the final 2 steps in the assignment, we have 2 selects, select all and select by ID, right? If I script that as a create, okay, remember the only difference between those 2 is that we passed in the primary key, or a parameter to match the primary key, so we're guaranteed to return the one exact record that we've asked for. I mentioned though in our discussions earlier that one of the most common filters, right, if we want to return multiple records but filtered by something in particular, one of the most common filters we typically do is a foreign key value. We have one foreign key value in the patient table, that's the doctor ID, right? So we can anticipate that quite likely, although it's not one of the 5 standard stored procedures, we quite likely in the client application might want to just list patients filtered by one doctor as opposed to seeing them all together, right? So with this up on the screen, I can very quickly and easily make that one change, okay? I could simply say this, instead of by ID, I could say by doctor ID. Right, so I'll create a new procedure by doctor ID instead, and instead of just passing ID, I might as well use, just to make it clear, doctor ID, which is the name of the actual foreign key field, right? And so basically my projection, as with all these other selects, you notice I never change what columns are actually being returned. That's important because if a client application is set up, okay, to work with certain columns, it's, you know, confusing for it if we suddenly have different columns showing up and so on. So we're going to return the same projection from our select, just our filter will be for the doctor ID matching doctor ID. Okay, our parameter. And that would be sufficient, right? Good. That would get the whole job done. We have the proper output and away we go. The only thing with this arrangement is, what if, you know, we don't want to have to dynamically switch what stored procedure we're calling on. We just want to use this stored procedure to return, optionally, all the patients, irregardless of doctor. Okay? Well, there's a couple ways we could approach that, and that's, as often, there's more than one right way to do things. But one of the simple techniques that makes it very easy is to utilize a flag value. Some kind of a flag value that if we pass this for our parameter, the doctor ID, basically it means we want to return all the records. We're really negating the effect of filtering whatsoever. So with an integer identity, with a standard seed and increment of 1 and 1, by coincidence a valid integer that will never ever generate is 0. So we can often set up these stored procedures like this with a integer identity, you know, value, just by if we pass 0 in, then we want to return all records. You could do that in logic if you wanted, but a nice and easy way is just to do AND, okay, or I should say, OR, okay. So I'm going to add an OR to the where clause. So I look for a match on the doctor ID, okay, so if it's doctor number 2, okay, Doogie Howser or whoever he is, then I would only get patients for Doogie Howser because their ID matches. But if I add an OR clause here, I could simply say, or my parameter, doctor ID, equals 1 or 0. And as a flag value then, if I call a procedure and pass 0, basically I'm just saying give me all patients, irregardless of doctor. That's one of the ways you can set up these kinds of stored procedures. So the procedure itself becomes reusable, and the 0 is a flag value of 0 to indicate all, right? We want all patients, not really filtered by doctor at all. So that's one way that we can do that. That's quite easy. So I'm just going to execute that. We'll make that as another stored procedure in our collection that we have over here. I'd have to refresh to see it actually show up. Okay, there it is. Or no, it isn't, but it will be. So we have select all, we have select by ID and select by doctor ID. Okay, you'll see it. It'll make more sense to you when we actually use it from the client application, which we'll be doing next. We'll do a little demo using all these stored procedures in an actual client application shortly. All right, well, let's move on for now because I do want to finish off. I can just close that one. I don't think I need this one open. Well, I might leave it open just for comparison. All right, back to the instructions. Okay, the next one we were asked to do in step 7 was a list style stored procedure for our doctor. The idea here is, we touched on this in our discussion, a list style procedure, as I'm referring to it, is one that is preparing data specifically to populate a drop-down list. Okay? And so if we need a pick list of doctors, why not have a data source ready to go, already sorted, because that's one of the important things whenever you have a drop-down. You want it in alphabetical order, okay? With some field set up to display the doctor information, right? And at the same time, the primary key value is usually used as the best choice for storing an internal value of the selected item in a drop-down list. So to do that, we'll simply come back here to Management Studio. I will create a new procedure, right? Create procedure, and I will call this USP underscore doctor list. Okay, I'll leave it for things. You just make one of these lists for every entity or doctor, patient, whatever, as an entity. So that's fine. I don't really need any parameters because it just wants to return an alphabetical list of all the doctors that I can use as a source for a drop-down. So I just say as. Now this is a data returning, so would I set no count on or off? Yeah, you're right. On. Okay, so we'll set no count to on because we don't need those extra messages. All we really need here is to select. Okay, so if I'm really lazy, I can even get it started by using the tool. So I'll just need the doctor table. I'll add that, and I can have the ID and first little middle last. I might as well grab all three of those. But we know we have our functions, right? We have our two functions that we created earlier that will help me format the name. In this case, I don't want that one with the DR period, although it does give me the right format, but it'd be pretty silly to call that when I'm already selecting from the doctor table anyway. So the other function we had, right, is the one that I'm going to actually use here. So I want the one column to be the ID, the second column to be my summary field of doctor information. So DBO, just to get IntelliSense to help me. My UDF name, okay, is reusable. I just have to pass a first, middle, and last. Oh, look at that. I have all my fields set up in the exact right order. I just have to put a comma, and there's one more parameter I need, and that's whether I want the formal name or the full name, right? Well, in this case, I definitely would want formal. The advantage of the formal name format in this circumstance is essentially the fact that the, here I might press enter, just we're running out of room on the screen. It's nice when I'm going to sort it alphabetically that I do it by last name and then first name and so on, right? And that's usually how we would want to pick it out of a pick list as well. So I could say as doctor or something like that, right? Now the other thing I'm missing at the moment from my select is the order by. Order by, and I could say last name, comma, first name, and that would work perfectly fine. But because this is already done for me, I could just say order by doctor as well. And that's using the alias here for this field. Okay. I mean, it's not right or wrong. I mean, if you want to just separately list last name, comma, first name, and then if you really want, middle initial, that's perfectly acceptable too. In fact, you could argue that this might be more performant depending on indexes in your system, right? But we only have 3 doctors, so performance isn't really a big worry for me at this stage. But this is just an example then of a list style stored procedure. Again, important thing is you're returning 2 columns, okay, the ID, and then some field, okay, concatenated the way you need to, so that in a single column of output, you have everything you need to kind of represent the doctor, or the entity itself, right? And it has to be in alphabetical order. So I can, because there's no parameters here, I can actually execute that and just see what the output looks like. Okay, perfect. It's in alphabetical order. Not a big difference, but Xavier clearly is last, right? Happens to be the same order they were created, but that's just coincidence. It actually is alphabetical by the name information. Any questions about that one? I'll just execute to create the procedure. Okay, so we're almost there. Just one more to go. One for the doctor. We aren't actually even going to be updating doctors at this point in time, but I just wanted to contrast. When we did the update for patient, we used timestamp to check for concurrency, right? We've talked about it, that another option you have, if you already have fields there for concurrency control, like with a date time to type field, right? It's not 100% accurate, but it's 99.999% accurate in terms of looking for concurrency problems. So we can just use it since we have the field there anyway, and because we so rarely need to worry about concurrency modifying the doctors, it will be more than good enough. So we're going to look at how we could use an update procedure for our doctor, okay, and utilize concurrency control using the updated on field as well. So it's just a variation on the one we already did for the patient, which I think I still have open here, right? This was the one we did for patient update. We have all the parameters, including the timestamp. We have updated by set to null. We handle that in case we aren't given anything, just replacing it with unknown. We do our standard update, our where clause, use the timestamp for concurrency as well as the ID to say which record to update. So it's going to be very much the same idea, right? So it'll be doctor update will be the name for my procedure. It's going to be not a data returning, so I'll want it to be off for no count. And of course the content here will be totally different, right? And to help me with that, once again, I can pull out my little trick, get the basic update written for me by the system. Script table as a update to a new query window, right? And this helps me with my search and replace technique to get all the parameters I need and so on in place as well. So I'm going to just grab all this parameter information. Actually, you know, I get it better. I'm only going to use this to copy and paste from, but if I do the same thing with insert, because I usually do an insert first, right? Script table as an insert. It just gives me easier, I don't have to have all the comparisons, okay? So it just gives me that for the parameters. With doctor update, I do need parameters for first name, middle initial, etc., all the way through, right? So quickly do the same steps we did the other day. I'm going to do some search and replace with Control H. So I'll look for my comma less than and replace that with the @ symbol. If I search for comma space, just to strip the commas out between the, replace that with a space between the names and the data types. That gets rid of those. And And then I can comma greater than, just replace that with a comma. So I have commas at the end of the fields. Oh. Oh, I have a space there. Okay, so I think I'm probably close. I have first, middle, last name, updated by. Now, the truth is I don't need separate created. Okay, I won't need them at all for an update. Makes sense, right? That will be involved when we do an actual insert with these extra created by fields, but they won't even be involved in an update because they'll never be changed. Okay, they're only changed when you first initially create the record. But I will, for the updated by, add my optional equals null, just in case we don't have somebody, and updated on. We don't normally even have the parameter there, we just use getDate for that, right? But in this case we do need to, so we can compare it. And we'll use it for concurrency control. Created, so we can just get rid of. But of course I am missing one thing that was left out of insert. What's that? Anybody? What parameter do I need to know for an update that I don't even have to worry about for an insert? I usually put it first. The ID, yeah. Okay. All right, so I have the ID first, middle, last name, updated by and updated on, and away we go. So we'll set no count to off, and just like we did before, in fact, I've got too many windows open here. Let me close some of them. I can steal some code here. Right? I'll set my updated by to unknown in case I don't know it. And now I'm ready to actually do the update. So I can steal this code, do some search and replace and so on. We're really just writing the actual update now, right? So we're going to update doctor, setting these equal to, and remember we've done this before. I'll just basically take everything out from the end. There's some created that I don't change. Okay, first, middle, last name, updated by, updated on. And let me just replace these angle brackets. So less than becomes my @ symbol. Okay, so I set the first name, the middle initial, the last name. Updated by comes from here. Updated on will come from the parameter that's passed in. That's fine. We will update that at the same time. Otherwise, it wouldn't have the new date time stamp, right? Actually, no, I would use getDate. Sorry. So updated on will be updated with the new time, right? It's down here in my conditions where I'll make use of it. So I'll have ID equals @ID. And similar to how we did it with timestamp, okay, updated on equals @updated on. Oh, get rid of that character. And that is that. So that is that final exercise, okay? So we're just creating a procedure in this case. Let me just execute, make sure it actually builds. Yeah. So passing in both updated by and updated on, although this is optional. If we don't have a value, we substitute unknown. And when we do the update, we do provide values, taking what's in our parameter here, which we might have modified, using getDate for a new timestamp, so to speak, for the record, stored and updated on, right? But we'll only actually do it if the current value hasn't changed from the parameter we've passed in. So from when I got my copy and when I'm sending my data back, no one else has executed this procedure that would have updated the actual data in the field. Of course, the vulnerability is if somebody went in there manually in the back and changed something, and they didn't change the actual data and update it on, my client application wouldn't know that that was an actual concurrency issue at all, right? It's only if they execute it through the procedure that it would catch that, okay? But of course, a timestamp, on the other hand, no matter how the record ever gets updated, it automatically updates the timestamp anyway. Here I'm manually changing our virtual timestamp, if you want to call it that. Okay, so now we are done. So we have all of our stored procedures necessary to actually build our interface. So I can actually close all these. I don't really need them because I can recreate them from the objects in the system, which are all done now. And we'll just refresh. So now I should see there's my doctor list, my doctor update. Okay, we did that more as an exercise. I'm not in the client at this point going to actually be updating doctors. But we're ready in case we ever do. Okay, so that is everything we need to do for now. I'm just going to pause the recording.